Welcome to today's Coach's Corner. I am so glad you are here, reminding me that I'm not alone, but you are with me on this journey of life with God. Isn't it terrible to feel anxious, worried, agitated, or angry, and on top of that, to feel all alone in it? Just imagining it makes my body tense up. Wasn't it cool though to discover that God has made the way back home with Him so simple and easy that we can come home with just our exhale? Oh, what good news it is for me, for you, and all the people in the world. Something inside of me has always believed that the gospel, the good news of Christ, should be accessible and available to everybody, not just for the rich, but also for the poor, not only the educated, but also the uneducated, not just the powerful, but also the weak. I have been searching for ways that reveal God's accessibility and availability clearly for those who long for emotional and relational healing and growth. The reason it has been so close to my heart is because I was one of those who were unable to freely access higher education in Korea due to the poverty I grew up in, and my parents were uneducated and poor. The deeper I study the fascinating worlds of brain science and our bodies, such as the autonomic nervous system, the clearer it becomes that God has made the way back home with Him, a path to restoring our sense of safety and reclaiming our birthright of connection, indeed, accessible and available to anyone humble and open to receiving it. The way back home with God is so easy and simple, almost too easy and simple that our educated minds cannot accept it and actually have a hard time to putting it into practice. I want to share a somatic practice I use for turning fright into delight. Whenever I become aware that my heart is going up and my muscles are becoming tense, I place one hand on my chest and the other either on my belly or on my face. This acts as a nonverbal reminder to my body that it's okay for my heart rate to go up because it'll surely come down. As God is right here with me, like my hands, God reminds me to breathe out after breathing in, offering a sense of peace and presence. Our God is turning our fright into delight in each breath we take. To me, it is a good news. I want you to take a moment to imagine God breathe with you and say, while putting His hands on you, my child, I'm right here with you. I see what's happening right now. I saw what has happened to you. No wonder it is scary for you now. It's okay. It's okay for you to feel bad. It's going to be really okay, for I'm right here with you. What a good news. If our nervous system has a history of experiencing fright, which triggers our instinctive cry for help, but then no one responded, or we were punished for reaching out, it's likely that our nervous system will adopt a strategy of freezing or suppressing our attachment cry, even when we are feeling frightened. In times of fear and sadness, the need for safe connection, instead of seeking help and connection, we might either withdraw or try to handle things on our own. Or we could lose the sense of what it feels like to be afraid and sad, becoming numb to these emotions because it feels safer than being left with unmet needs. This reaction makes perfect sense. After all, who would want to add more pain? When it comes to our spiritual journey, it is fascinating to see how these same patterns show up in our relationship with God. Often, it doesn't even occur to us that we have a spiritual home to return to for support or help when we feel caught off guard, ambushed, surprised, or when something doesn't feel right. Instead, we try to manage things on our own as if downplaying our struggles is a sign of spiritual maturity. We act like handling things by ourselves shows how much we love and trust God. We don't think there's anything wrong when a baby is frightened and cries for help, do we? They are simply doing what they are naturally designed to do. In fact, it would be worrisome if a baby didn't cry out for their parents' presence. If you are a parent, you know how satisfying it is to help your child settle and feel at home again in your presence. No matter our age or level of maturity, we all have a vulnerable part within us that longs for a perfect home with a perfect parental presence. This is a part of what it means to be human on earth. Jesus, the perfect human, felt vulnerable and was seeking support from his disciples. I'm not promoting to lead your life from a place of vulnerable part of you. What I'm inviting you is to bring that part of you who's stuck in feeling frightened to God for his support and help. Don't we all think of God as our original parent and our first family of origin, our real home? He's like the best parents ever, always glad to see us coming back home to touch base with him. You might sometimes wonder, is my problem really important enough to take to God? We often downplay our issues, thinking they are too small, especially when we think about the bigger problems others face. But when we say this, are we genuinely concerned for those who are struggling more? Or are we actually worried about being dismissed or even punished for asking? That makes sense why we do this so automatically. Our nervous system had to develop the skill to stay safe. This feels very familiar to me, and it also reminds me of the elder son in the story of the prodigal son. What am I suggesting isn't simply about fixing problems by talking to God about everything and anything, even though we are invited to do just that. Rather, I, at this point, encourage you to become curious and see if you can recognize a similar pattern within yourself. Whenever you feel slightly taken aback, noticing something odd or weird, or feel unsure, I encourage you to pause and get curious about what's happening inside of you. Could this be the start of feeling frightened? Is there a slight urge to reach out for a connection? Maybe this is an invitation from God to come home for a moment to get reassured. While you continue to practice catching moments of delight and becoming familiar with the path back home through exhaling, I also want you to use those initial moments of feeling frightened as an invitation from God to come home. In these moments, allow yourself to be delighted by the gift of God's loving parental presence. You know, Jesus turned water into wine. He wants to turn your fright into delight. Would you give him a chance? People of light, we got this with the help of the Holy Spirit.